Hi, and welcome to our last episode of the World of Publishing webinar series. My name is Lamar Giles, and I've been a professional storyteller for over 25 years. I've published over a dozen novels. I'm Swim Library's inaugural writer in residence, and I'm here to engage the William and Mary community in fun and exciting ways that promote our incredible library, literacy, and general creative pursuits. The World of Publishing webinar series offers insightful conversations with publishing professionals to demystify an often perplexing industry. It is suitable for the career-minded writer, the casual writer, the student writer, and those who are simply curious. In today's session, we're going to be talking to a couple of Virginia's beloved literary heroes. The conversation will be recorded and available for those who are unable to join us live today. But for those in session, a Q&A box is available at the bottom of the window for you to submit questions that we will attempt to address either during our conversation or a designated Q&A session before we close out. If we miss your question, you can email me at lgiles@wm.edu and I will attempt to get you your answer. Without further delay, let's meet today's guest. Amber McBride is an award-winning author of books for all ages. Her young adult novels in verse, Me, Moth, and The Leaving Room, were both finalists for the National Book Award, among many other accolades. Gone Wolf, McBride's middle grade fiction debut, was awarded the Los Angeles Times Book Prize and was named a Best Book of the Year by Publishers Weekly and Kirkus Review. Her adult poetry collection, Thick with Trouble, was said to be laced with magic and mystery. McBride provides readers with a fresh take on America's violence-laden past and present and a chorus of unapologetic women by the Southern Review of Books. McBride's books have garnered over 20 star reviews, and she was an assistant professor at the University of Virginia for several years. Amber now lives in Central Virginia and keeps bees. Carter Higgins is the author of many books for young readers, including Everything You Need for a Treehouse, an NPR Best Book of the Year. This Is Not a Valentine, a Kids Indie Next List selection, and the chapter book series Audrey L. and Audrey W. Her first book as both author and illustrator, Circle Under Berry, was named a Best Book of 2021 by Publishers Weekly, Smithsonian Magazine, and the Wall Street Journal. Carter is a creative storyteller who designs playful experiences around visual literacy and believes the wit of kids' language is the best poetry of all. She's an Emmy-winning visual effects and motion graphics artist and spent a decade as an elementary school librarian. She lives in Richmond, Virginia. Thank you, Amber. Thank you, Carter, for joining us.
Thank you for having me.
So
Hi.
I like to start off kind of with the same question with everybody. I stole this from Inside the Actors Studio, if I'm being honest. And I'll start with you, Amber. Where did you grow up and how did you come to storytelling?
First of all, thank you for having me, Lamar. It's really great. I've been watching your series, so I'm really excited to be here. So I come from a military family. So I was born overseas and lived a lot of places, but the most amount of time I spent in Virginia, which is where my parents were born. So my dad's from Alexandria, my mom's from Charlottesville. So I went to school in Northern Virginia. And I guess how did I come to storytelling? I think I come from a family of storytellers. They're just constantly telling us stories. And so it kind of came naturally to me. And then I kind of went into school and started as pre-med, ended as English, and kept going.
We need to talk about the pre-med to English track. My wife was on a similar thing, and I mean, I don't know. Like, there must be statistics about how that would be. Um, Carter, what about you? Where did you grow up, and how did you come to storytelling?
Yeah, hi, I grew up in Richmond, Virginia. And after a long time away, I moved right back to Richmond a couple of years ago. So I'm sort of like closing the loop on some time away. Storytelling though, I don't know. I don't remember a time that I wasn't into stories. I don't know that I was telling them for a while, but I was just like a book kid, like I wanted to like crawl into the pages. It took actually like a long time, like speaking of like career paths, like it took a long time to figure out that I could be the person that tells the stories and not just the person that, is immersed in them.
Oh, thank you for that. So, you were born in Richmond, but you went away for a little while. So, I want to talk about that a little bit, like just for reciprocity's sake. I was born in Virginia, and I lived here almost my entire life, with the exception of a 6 month period when I went to work for Disney World. And so I'm curious, and I would like to know this too. Like Carter, we know you went away for a while. Like where were you? What was going on in the parts of the world where you went? I'm curious about that journey and then coming back to Virginia.
Yeah. Yeah. And I should have said too, I went to William and Mary. Like that feels like maybe an
Feels relevant.
important
That feels
point I
relevant. Yeah,
missed.
yeah. I should have mentioned it in your bio. I mean, when I was doing your bio stuff, so that's on me too.
No, that's fine. I left Richmond about 20 years ago and I moved to Los Angeles, and I was going to a year-long, like basically a trade school program to learn how to do motion graphics. I had been a school librarian, and at the time it was like the early 2000s, and there was so much like cool like educational technology, and I felt really limited by like what the templates looked like. Do you remember, like, this is going to date us, but do you remember like DVD menus and how they would like loop, but they would be like 30-second small visual stories that represented like a 2-hour film. Like I was fascinated by that. So I moved to LA and learned how to do that, and then stayed for for almost 20 years. We moved to Las Vegas during like COVID to get a little more space, but and then I moved back to Richmond to help my family. But it was nice to be away, and it's nice to be back.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, I've had, like I said, I had a little bit of experience with that when I went down to Florida for a bit, and then I was homesick, and I came back, and I haven't left
Oh.
since. Amber, have you been here the whole time, or have you been away at all? Like,
I went to grad school I guess in my adult life, I've been here most of the time. I went to grad school in Boston. I went to undergrad at James Madison University. And for the most part, in my adult life, I have been settled here, and I really have no desire to go anywhere else. I think I do get homesick. Like I think a lot of my family is in Virginia, and I'm a big family person. So I would miss too many people if I moved. Yeah.
well, a big deterrent for me moving up. I'm just obsessed with home prices. So I look at other states and like how much housing cost. I'm like, no way in Virginia you could have a mansion in Virginia for that price. So that sort of keeps me grounded here. Carter, I want to talk to you about the motion graphics thing. Like, and yes, I remember the DVD menus. In fact, I remember pre-DVD. I remember the VHS tapes, and so I am dating myself. But the you being a librarian and wanting to also, you're looking at motion graphics. Like how does that transition occur, and what does it take to go from this occupation to that occupation, and then eventually
Yeah.
bookmaking?
Yeah, yeah. Yeah, I mean, I can fill in the gaps a little. Like the reason that like DVD menus was so like kind of the thing that got me was because when I was teaching, when I was a librarian, I was working with students on like creating digital portfolios of work. And like this is pre-iPhone, like this is pre-screens everywhere. But I just started noticing how I responded to that. Like what a big one too was title sequences to films. Like again with the short visual representation of like a much bigger idea, which essentially is like very similar to picture books if we're like kind of making a leap. And so it was storytelling in just a different way, like it does seem strange to say like I was, taught kindergartners how to use the library and then was like working in Hollywood. But it made sense to me. And I think now after doing both of those things and coming to books, like books is sort of the natural like middle point of that Venn diagram of graphic design, visual, like compositing design, actual book storytelling. And again, it just took me a long time to realize like, oh, I could be the person that makes the books that I am so obsessed with.
Well, I'm going to back up real quick to the motion graphics thing because you won an Emmy. Is that so? What's that like? Like how do you like? First of all, how are you notified? Then
Yeah.
do you go to like the big show that's on TV?
Yeah, yeah.
How it works?
It's like a really great like two truths and a lie fact because like no one actually thinks that you do, but like, oh, I think it's a little blurry. I'm like just moving in, so there's a lot of junk back there, but like there it is. It's real.
Oh, nice, nice.
I won it as part of a team. We won in the news and documentary category for outstanding art direction and graphic design. So I was one of like 10 or 12 people named on this award. our bosses, like the art directors, got to go to the show, but it wasn't like the primetime Emmys. It was the news and documentary, like not televised. We had to purchase our own, but like, yeah, I was gonna do that, right? Like if you won an Emmy, would you not purchase one?
Okay, so are Emmys expensive? Like when you buy your own, is
Yeah, it
that?
was like $350.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. I would have
Worth
done
it,
it too.
worth
I
it.
would have done it too.
Yeah. I
Oh,
mean, definitely part of a team. And, ironically, it was the last project I worked on in television before I went back to being a librarian. So it kind of felt like really, okay, I did that career and now I'm going back to my roots and, I succeeded.
that's awesome. That's awesome, Amber. Your career path. You have taught at some of our esteemed universities, James Madison University, UVA, and I'm curious what you were teaching during your time as a professor, and were you working on stories in your spare? Like, how were you working in your own creative pursuits while still managing your teaching duties?
Not in a healthy way. Burnout, which is why I ended up resigning. Um, but no, I think that a lot of things that I would teach, I would teach from literature, freshman writing, all the way to graduate school creative writing. So I had a lot of different preps. It was a lot of um, depending on the semester. But in literature, I taught my specialty is protest literature. So literature as a form of protest, which I loved teaching. And then I also would teach workshops that were focused in folklore and your own like kind of voice and creation stories. So it would always change a bit, but it was fun. And then freshman writing is freshman writing. It's just getting in there and trying to get them to write an essay. But it was really good. I do miss teaching a lot, and I think I will go back to it. But at this time, it just was becoming a lot. Teaching a 3-3 schedule. And I had been teaching for a decade, so it was about time to take a break.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, you have a lot going on. I mean, your books are doing some huge things. So, time is finite. You have to do what you have to do, right?
Yes.
Well, speaking specifically about the books part of this, and this is a question for both of you. Maybe Amber, we can stick with you just to start. What's the story behind your first book deal? Like, was it tough to find representation and an eventual publishing home? How were things before your first book published?
Mine was rough. I had a very rough getting into publishing. Originally, I wrote two different books that didn't get agents. And then I got an agent with my third book, which didn't sell. And then my next book didn't sell. And then at that point, I was kind of like annoyed. And I was like, I'm gonna write whatever I want. Forget y'all. And then I wrote Me Moth. And that one sold to Liz Sabla at Fywell and Friends, who's been my editor for 6 or 7. I think we just signed on our seventh book together. And it kind of went from there. But I had hundreds of rejections from agents, hundreds of rejections from editors. It took a lot for me to get in there, and it was over a 5-ish year period that I was like going on that journey. I also had a really interesting, I talk about this a bit, where with my second book, I feel okay, so a lot of people know that like when your book goes on sub and it quote dies on submission to editors, usually that book is shelved and you're not going to publish it. I have a very interesting experience because I had a book that was on sub, was supposed to be an editor promised that they were going to offer on it. They didn't all of a sudden, and we shelved it, and then it ended up coming out because my other editor liked it, and it was Gone Wolf. So Gone Wolf might have been my first novel, but because lots of things were happening, it ended up being, I think it was what, my third. But yeah, it was a rough journey. I think publishing tends to be like that though, for a lot of people.
Well, I want to stay on this for a second just to talk about my own experience because it was similar in that hundreds of rejections across. I was getting rejected more so trying to find an agent than eventually found an agent and then started getting the publisher rejections. And I think it's something important to be said, particularly for any of the aspiring writers out there, about that moment when you're like, all right, forget this. I'm just going to do what I want. I'm not going to let some strangers determine my fate. Like when I hit that point, I ended up self-publishing like a short story collection and a novella. I'm like, I'm just going to be my own publisher. And as soon as I made that decision, I sold a book to a major publisher. So I think it's something in there about going through that particular gauntlet and coming out on the other side, like I'm going to do this no matter what, that the universe sort of responds to. Um,
Yeah.
it,
And you kind of stop, like to a certain extent, whether you realize or not, you're trying to write what you think will be published. And
mhm,
then you realize it's not working that way. I'm going to do whatever I want. And then you realize that like it is about the individuality of your writing
yeah.
that is making you unique. So yeah.
Now that's an excellent point. Carter, what was your trying to be published experience like?
Yeah, I mean, ditto,
Mhm,
all of that.
Oh,
I remember I wanted to work with this agent before. Let's just consider this already having lots of rejections from other agents, but I really wanted to work with this one agent, and I like crafted a few manuscripts after he was like asking what I had, and um, I tried so hard to get an agent that all of a sudden we started working together, and I was like, do I even like this
mm,
body of work? Like, did I just write these things in order for him to say like, yes, like I will sign you and like now we can go. So it was actually like kind of interesting to me, like brand new to the industry and like brand new to a business relationship too, to be like, wait, like you liked all that work, but I don't know that I want us to go out with it. So I took a little time and just like you said, like wrote something that I really wanted to write and felt like me and not me trying to like get approval into publishing. And that was the first book that I sold. And like to this day, probably one of my top performing books. And it's, nearly 10 years old at this point. So like exactly what you said.
mhm. Well, that leads me to another question. Like you're saying, that book is probably one of your better performing books. So I'm curious about, because I think there's a distinction to be made between the lead up to publishing and then that first year when you're published. I call it the rookie year. And I'm curious what your rookie year was like, Carter, and I'll come to you shortly, Amber. Like, what was that first year of being a published author and trying to navigate that part of it?
Yeah, painful. I was a school librarian at the time. And so, and I don't know, like, were you all active on Twitter when it was like a fun place to be?
Yeah, yeah.
There was such a great community of elementary school librarians, teachers, writers. Like, there was just so much community, really. And I felt like, oh, I'm a librarian. Like, I know exactly like what to do with books because I can do it for everyone else's books. And all of a sudden, it was like mine. And I was like, oh, do you want to read this thing that I have? And it was so awkward to sort of be public in that way. And the other thing that happens is that I'm still writing, I'm still drafting new things, but all of a sudden I'm comparing my like writing notebook and first drafts to like this beautiful published book that took a lot of people years to make. So yeah, it's a lot of like visibility stuff that was tricky for me. And then also just like, oh, how do I write now? Like, what does it look like to be at the beginning again?
Amber, what was your rookie year like?
I was a COVID debut, so
Wow.
Oh no.
Wow.
No.
um 2021. Also, my rookie year was a fever dream. I feel like my second year was harder because one, I of course you don't think you're going to be a National Book Award finalist with your first book. And then two, it all happened so quickly. I was also a professor at the time, full time, and honestly, I can't even tell you because I was like, what? I don't know what happened. I think that like my book originally didn't even have an audio book that I then had to go in studio and record. I feel like there was just so much happening. And then for me, the lesson I learned was really on my second book to realize that like sometimes all that buzz that you originally get with your first book to like start up here and then to come out with another one that might not like you can't expect it to be the same. And that was when I had to be like, okay, no, there's different levels to this career. And that was me where it was a bit more difficult with my second book coming out. But my first book, I try to remember it, but I was like, we were quarantined, National Book Award was online. I didn't talk to anybody. I didn't, all my events were virtual. Like it was such a strange liminal space of like, is my book really in the world? I don't know. Like I haven't seen it anywhere. So yeah, that was weird. I think that my most fun book release would have been my middle grade when my first time I went on book tour. So that was very different experiences when like COVID was like the first thing.
So, I mean, I have all sorts of questions about being a COVID debut who also is a National Book Award finalist. I guess my biggest question would be just like, did your job put more respect on your name? Like, did the university really appreciate that they had a National Book Award finalist teaching in one of their departments?
Oh no, not really, which is one of the um no, I think that that's a whole story right there, and part of the reason why I'm not at UVA. But it was really cool to see how many writers came in to support when they heard about my book and it was a finalist. And I'm just like this new author, like I don't know what I'm doing. To have like some of your idols slide into your DMs, like, do you need help with this? Is this what you need? Like, do you understand this is what's gonna happen? This is what this feels like. And so that was really the part where I was like, this community is really, really great. And supporting other people once they like know about that particular book. But no, I think for university it was even harder because we were still online for part of it and all this was happening and it was just one of those things where it felt surreal. I feel like everyone feels like COVID years. Did they happen?
You
Yeah.
know, I mean, I also should thank you because I think that's when we first met, and
Oh, it was the Virginia Festival of the Book.
which was online, and
Yes.
you moderated or interviewed me about my book, Not So Pure and Simple, which came out a month before everything shut down. So I was dealing with similar things in terms of like, is this even really happening? And you were wonderful to me. Thank you for that.
I was so excited because I had loved your books. And then they're like, would you like to moderate this with Lamar? I was like, yes. This is cool. I'm remembering that is how we met. Yeah.
Oh, so Carter, you and I met when I had the pleasure of presenting the Library of Virginia Award to you for your book Round and Round the Year We Go, which you wrote and illustrated. And you've also written books where you had the opportunity to work with an illustrator. So I'm curious, from your perspective, what factors determine if you'll hand off illustration duties to someone else, or you're like, I'm doing this one's all me.
Mhm. Yeah, I love that question. Picture books are such an interesting art form. If we all sort of know them because we were a kid once, or we have kids in our lives, right? They are deceptively simple. They look really easy to pull off, but it's a very like puzzle style of writing. If I'm writing only, my job is to not do visuals, but I have to leave a lot of space for an illustrator to come alongside and I almost said fill in the gaps, but it's not even fill in the gaps. It's like present a whole visual story to something that I wrote. And you work at kind of different times. So that's weird. Um, but it's also really satisfying. Like you have to sort of unlearn everything you know about writing. Well, I had to unlearn everything I knew about writing and be really spare and think about like the principles of poetry, even if I'm not writing poems, just to what can I do with words that can't be done in pictures and leave enough space that something in pictures can be done that I'm not doing in words. So that I love doing that. I will never want to stop being an author of a book that another illustrator illustrates. There's so many talented people working today. It's also like it's just a treasure trove of like what your books can look like. And then my shelf looks entirely different because there's so many, beautiful illustrators. But I also want to make books where I'm doing both parts because that just brings me back to like second grade, folding paper and stapling the corners and like figuring out like, is this a picture or is this part words? And so I want to do that as well. How I know the difference for me, like because of a motion graphics background, my visual style is very like graphic, simple, not easy, but it's simple. And so I often will work on illustrations for like more conceptual books. And if I'm writing something that has more of like a plot, which is very hard for me, I don't know how, Amber, like long books with plots is like incredibly impressive. But if it's any kind of like sequential narrative, like I that's not at all something that I would feel strongly about illustrating. So I kind of know from the start, like which sort of bucket the project goes in.
Okay.
Mm.
Well, thank you for sharing that. And you brought up something I was going to ask Amber about, which is her process. Like I guess we always want to know, like, how do you do that? Because I think your work's fantastic, Amber. But I'll ask a more specific question. Because you've written novels in verse and prose novels, what is the process for you deciding how you want to present your story?
It's a great question. Me thinking. First of all, I want to say, Carter, on illustrations, now that I have a picture book out, illustrators are extraordinary. Like, I don't even understand mine. Her name is Violetta, and I was like taken away by the idea of what you were saying of things that we ended up taking out words from my book because she could illustrate it. Like, and we could create more space. And that is just like something I didn't know until I got into it. So yes, that was such an experience. The for poetry, so if I want to write a novel in verse, it really comes down to plotting and also um emotion. So like my books are a lot very character driven. So there's things happening, but I'm always very focused on character. And so when I want people to come away with a feeling, like that feeling of goosebumps when you listen to a good song or the feeling of like when you watch a good movie and everyone takes like a sigh at the end of it, I usually am writing in verse. If I want people to come away with a thesis, for example, with Gone Wolf, what happens when we don't tell history incorrectly, I'm writing in prose because I need more space to tell the story. Like I have to guide the reader a bit more. Because I do know the kind of idea I would hope for them to come away with. With poetry, it's so much that it's about the character so much that I think there's 1,000 different emotions that each reader is going to have when they bring their own reading and their background to it. So emotion based versus thesis based is kind of what I uh
Like
decide.
mind blowing. I love that.
So,
It's
forgive me if I'm messing this up. I thought I saw this online, Amber.
Mhm.
Is your mom your first beta reader?
She is, and she's terrifying.
I was gonna ask, how is that? How is that?
My mother is like anybody who knows her is like everyone loves her, but also like slightly terrified of her because she's a very honest person. And so when people are like, how do you deal with all the critique from published? I'm like, you don't know my mother. Like I'm good. So really she reads it as my reader. Like she's a person who reads, but she's not an avid reader. So for me, she's like my perfect reader of like if she gets it, I feel like most people will get it. And so she reads it, she puts her little glasses on, she sits at her computer, and essentially I like stalk her every minute she gets through a page and like kind of try to get reactions. But she gives really good notes. And the one that I love to tell about is We're All So Good at Smiling, which ended up doing very well. But it's a book about clinical depression. And the first draft of it, she read, it was like my birthday month. And then she finished reading on my birthday. So I wanted her to tell me if she liked it or not. And she was like, I'll talk to you tomorrow. In my head, I was like, that means she hates it. It's like this is not good. And she did hate it. And she told me she hated it. And I was like, well, what part? She was like all of it. And I was like, okay, cool. That's going to be hard to fix the whole thing. And so we got conceptually to the idea that like the metaphor wasn't working in the original draft. And I manically went back and wrote the entire thing in 2.5 weeks, gave it back to her, and now it's her favorite book. So it was like a challenge to like get that. But yeah, my mom's always my first reader. If she hates it, it doesn't even get to my editor. It doesn't get to my agent. She is really good at like being like, this isn't working, this is working.
I mean, well, that's kind of nice to have in house, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean,
And
so
it's quick. It's quick. You know, when you have your friends beta read, sometimes they have 1,000 things to do, right? Like, understandably, my mom is like, you give it to her, next day she's on it. She's reading it. So I can do a good round of edits. I think it's also why I have pretty clean first drafts and first drafts that get to my agent and then to my editor. I have pretty clean because she is such a good first reader.
excellent,
I
excellent.
love that because like what you're saying about her being an avid reader, but not like, or no, she's a reader, but not an avid reader. Like so often if I'm reading my friend's work, like I'm thinking like a writer
Yes.
so often rather than a reader. And so having that kind of feedback must be so valuable where she's just like reacting, not thinking about like the poetic devices that you're using or like how
Great.
you're,
That's what my editor
tension. Yeah,
Yeah, it's really helpful. And to make sure you
that's
just
cool.
wrote the very simple thing. Did you write a good story? Like that is what she's
Mhm.
being a great judge for.
I love that.
Yes, that's awesome. That's awesome. To our attendees, if you have questions for Carter or Amber, please feel free to start putting those in the Q&A box, and I'll work them in as they come through. Um, Back to you, Amber and Carter. The whole session today is about like hometown heroes and hometown being the whole state of Virginia. And as a Virginian, I know how I think about it, but I'm always curious how other Virginia writers think about it. How much Virginia is on your mind and makes it into your work when you're drafting, if at all? Either one of you can go.
You know, I wrote one middle grade novel. It came out early in my career, and I'm proud that it exists, but it's not very good. Basically, like I recognize, like, wow, like what an accomplishment. Like you published this novel and like haven't written very many other ones. Like that's cool, but also don't read it. Um, and I at that one was very Virginia driven. Like, but what I was trying to do was make this like small town community like a character. And I recognize now it's like, oh, it's just like not a character, but a caricature. Like it was very it was not elegant. Sometimes I say this with love. It was my like Kate DiCamillo fan fiction era. So like Virginia like heavily featured there. And then once I moved to picture books that are like a little place agnostic, there's less Virginia in those, but because I'm working for such young children, I it might not be in the book, but I'm constantly thinking about like my childhood and like what did I like, who was I? You know, not everyone had the same childhood I did, of course, obviously, but like I'm thinking about Virginia a lot. It's just not put into my books.
Mm. I think for me, that's really interesting. When you talk about like the picture book or like the different aspects that would make it Virginia be like more prevalent or subconsciously kind of prevalent. But I'm going through all my books. I'm pretty sure all my books, except for Leaving Room, which takes place in a liminal space, um, all my books happen in Virginia, like very clearly talking about like Virginia. And I think it's because it's the place I know the best, but also I just think that one review I got for Gone Wolf was that I gave such a more realistic representation of Charlottesville, Virginia, in the second part of the book. And I think that so often I think Virginia is considered the South. If you go on threads, they think differently. But I think that so often the South is represented so in such a different way. And I feel like even I have writers who I respect who are like, I can't believe you live in Central Virginia. And I'm like, it's a beautiful place. There's amazing people. There's so much history. And also my family has been here for every generation until I tracked to enslavement. And so like I think that like there's so much culture here that I'm always trying to just show the other side of like, you don't have to, like, Black girls live in Virginia and they have very interesting stories that happen that aren't always about racism, kind of thing. And so I think that I'm very intentional about that. But also, I just think that there's so much of my young adult life happened here and really shaped me into who I am. And for my picture book, A Magic Hoodoo Child, it's set in Keswick, Virginia, which is right beside Charlottesville because I went there in the summers, entire summers with my grandmother, which is like a huge part of that book. So I think that it's so integral to who I am as a writer and who I am when I like go talk to people. And when you go to the West Coast and people are like, you do have a Southern accent. I'm like, do I? That's interesting. That
You
kind
know, it always gets me when I go places. They're like, "Yeah, you have the accent," and of course we don't hear it, so I don't know what they're talking about. It, with the exception of my novel Overturn, which is set in Las Vegas, which Carter, you and I will talk about very shortly. Um, all of my books are set in Virginia, with the exception of the IP projects like Star Wars, of course. And it's Virginia, but I always make up cities that stand in for real cities because my anxiety will not allow me to write a real city and mess something up, and then I got to hear about it for the rest of my life. I just can't imagine it. But the thing I always say is like I was so frustrated as a high school student having to read so many books that were set away from here, particularly like in London, and didn't recognize any of these people as the people I knew from. I grew up in Hopewell, Virginia, and I always said like if I ever get to publish something, I'm going to make kids in London have to read about Virginia. And so
There you go.
in some ways I say I write out of spite because of that.
I
Um,
love that.
This
we
is
have a
my
couple of questions from the attendees, and it's a question from Shannon and a question from Brianna, but it's almost kind of like the same question. So I'll just read it one way. Um, how do you decide what audience a book is geared towards? YA versus picture book versus middle grade. And this is Shannon saying that they are writing something that feels like the main character should be either 13ish or 17ish, and they're torn on how to spin it.
Oh, I guess I can go on that.
Yeah,
I just
I'm sorry. Amber, you go, and Carter, if you have any
But
insight.
I don't
Okay.
know.
very important to remember that so often I think that whatever book this person's working on could work either way. It's more about the tone of the way that you're addressing the story, if that makes sense. Because like we have award-winning authors, like Jesmyn Ward, she writes 13-year-olds, but that's adult literature. Like she writes 18 or 17-year-olds, but it's considered adult literature because of the way that it's approached. So I think that it's so much about tone. How would you speak to a 13-year-old? How would you speak to an 18-year-old? How would they sound? And the story that you want to tell, what is the best age to tell that specific story? Um, because I don't think that age, that's the thing that I learned and that I'm still learning, is that age does not dictate what genre the book is, because you can have a 15-year-old character and it could still be an adult book or like that. So it's the way that you're approaching it, and your audience would be young adults. So how are you writing it for young adults? Just like how would you write that same book for adults is going to be a little different because you could get into some more nitty-gritty kind of things.
Amber, do you have any insight there? You're like, I said Amber. I meant Carter. I apologize.
Oh,
Um,
I was like,
yeah, yeah,
more?
yeah.
Okay.
Sorry. I meant, forgive me.
No, you're good. I was like on Amber's every last word. Um, yeah, I kind of not so much with the age of characters, but um, even across picture books, I often am working for like a very young reader, even up to like an older child. And first of all, like, let's just say like picture books are for everybody. There's not like an age limit to them, but there is kind of a different approach to whether like I want someone to buy this book for a 3-year-old versus an 8-year-old. Um, I'm always thinking about an experience. Maybe this is similar to like what Amber was talking about, like writing novels in verse, leaving a reader with an emotion. Like I want like a 3-year-old. I have a series coming out that has like flaps and spinny things. And like, that was one of the most satisfying projects to make because I got to think like, what are they going to do here? And like, what's going to happen if they like, lift this flap? Is there something funny underneath? Like, what's surprising? Like they're learning the books turn pages left to right. Like how do I make that an experience? I have some books that are like, I've tried to make that reading experience like differ. Like I'm just going to hold it because it's right here. This is not like buy my book, but like this is like a kind of an in between trim size, which means like how big it is. Like it's small enough to look like a baby-ish book, but it's not too small that like a second grader thinks it looks dumb. So I'm like always thinking like, how can I make one thing, but in the way that like Pixar movies have jokes for kids and adults? Like, what can I bring to this project that expands the age range for it?
Mm.
Well, you didn't want to say it, but I'll say it. Buy Carter's book. Uh, buy
It's
Carter's
okay.
book. We got a question from. We got this is an interesting question, and I'm going to say your whole name, and everyone will know why once I read the question. This is from Hannah Summers. Hannah Summers has a picture book coming out soon that's based in Central Virginia. Congratulations, Hannah.
Nice. I'll
And so
look for
buy
that.
Hannah's book too. And her question is for Amber. Did you specifically name the area, city, or county in your picture book? My editor advised me that I should name a location, so I did.
Let me think for a second. One thing you're going to learn as you write more books is that you forget books as soon as you write. Um, okay, so I know for a fact that the person was coming from New York and all the way to Virginia. I don't know that I said the specific place in Virginia, but I named very specific landmarks there. But I do think that I'm interested in I think the cool thing about if you do name the place is that that place is going to be like, we're going to stock this book. Like they're going to be excited, right? That could be a selling point they're thinking about. But I do think this idea of a broader, kind of like what you're saying, Lamar, you're like, I'm not naming a specific place. I'm giving all the hints, and it's everyone can guess that maybe it's a city somewhere in Central Virginia. I've seen it done both ways, but for mine, I don't say specifically that it is Keswick, Virginia. It just is Virginia.
Um, Shannon thanked us for the answering her question, and she has one more, which is kind of a fun question. What's a writing rule you love to break? I'll go first here just because it's something I'm doing right now that you're really not supposed to do, and I just don't care. It's the first draft. We'll see how it goes. Like
Just like
I switch from third person to first person POV depending on the chapter in this book I'm doing right now. And largely when you're beginning, someone will tell you that's a no-no. The concept of the book, I'm not allowed to talk about it yet. I think justifies it, but maybe it doesn't. My editor will tell me soon. But that's one thing I'm doing right now that feels really fun, not to be confined by once you start this way, it has to be that way the whole book.
Yeah. Oh, that's interesting. I don't,
hmm.
I think that as a creative writing professor and everything, I think that there is this idea to me that you learn all the rules and then you break them all. Like it's so cliche, but I think it's so true because there is this idea of like then you understand why you're breaking them, like Lamar is saying. Like I'm doing this because I think it works for the story. I'm going to get a second opinion on it, but like because I know how it's supposed to be, now I know how to break them. My particular favorite rule to break is um I think that novels in verse break all the rules, really. I think that they're saying, hey, we're going to use line breaks, we're going to use extended metaphor, we're going to tell you everything they say that kids don't like about poetry, and then we're going to make them somehow like it and follow an entire story and just have, instead of having like a collection of poetry, which I think is very, very different from like how you would write a traditional novel. I think I also just like to push against things that we say we like know. There's a lot of hoodoo in my books, and so there's a lot of jumps in magic that my editor originally was like, "This makes no sense," and I was like, "It does in hoodoo," and I practice it, so that's what it's going to be. And so I think that that kind of thing. But really, I think that breaking the rules comes with that confidence that you get as a writer on what you know you're trying to create, which I think does take a little bit of time to start breaking them in ways where you know that you can explain to someone why you did that.
I love that. Yeah, like I think about mechanics a lot. Like if you've been around picture books or want to publish picture books, often what one of the rules you hear is like editors don't want rhyming books don't sell. And if they do, they have to be so flawlessly, perfectly metered. Like, and all of that is true. So like I guess that is a rule, but to me, to my ear, that starts to sound so monotonous. I think a lot, not always, but like a lot of people are just chasing like end rhymes because they hear that advice and then they like there's no like magic in the internal line leading up to the end. So I'm like always playing with sound design and rhythms and ensuring that someone who picks up my book cold can read it without like stumbling over what it's supposed to sound like. But I need to do like near rhymes and like breaks in rhythm. If it's if I'm doing it well and like pulling it off, it's cued well enough to not let a cold reader stumble. But to me, that just sounds more musical and interesting. So I'm kind of probably breaking that one quite a bit.
We have a question from Marissa who says, I'd love some advice as to what to do next with my picture book manuscript. I'd really like it to be traditionally published. I'm previously unpublished and currently unrepresented. What is your advice for an emerging picture book author? Also, Marissa actually added on to this too. I think we're talking about the same book. This manuscript won me the Walter Grant from We Need Diverse Books this year. Congratulations, Marissa.
Amazing.
And now I'm a bit overwhelmed and confused about the next steps. So it's like a two-parter from Marissa.
Well, I would send that as a with a query letter to anyone you want to work with and say, like, this manuscript is the Walter Award-winning, like, We Need Diverse Books scholarship, however you phrase it. That is an appealing thing for an agent to realize how talented you already are, and other people have recognized that, and they might want to take a look. I guess what I'm like, I don't know if this is the appropriate use of buried the lead, but I think I buried the lead there in that I really think you need to find an agent to have sort of help navigate this industry for you. So many publishers are closed to unagented submissions, and just stuff gets lost in the slush pile of it all. And having an agent is really how you can navigate what to do career wise.
And I'm going to echo what Carter said, particularly the part about the Walter Grant. I was a founding member of We Need Diverse Books, and I was there when we gave away the first Walter Grant. And that first one went to Angie Thomas, who went on to publish The Hate You Give and many other massive hit books. And times are a little different now with the way publishers are handling the idea of diversity, unfortunately. But the thing is, I think the Walter Grant still holds quite a bit of weight. So when you're seeking representation, I certainly would lead with that. And when you get a rep, and I'm confident you will, I'm certain they'll have the foresight to lead with it as they take your book out on submission.
Yeah. And my little adding on, because I'm not really a picture book person, is if you find some picture book writers that you love and see who their agent is a great starting point in finding what agent might be a good match for you, and who you would want to query.
Yeah,
Um,
that's a great tip.
yeah, yeah. We have a question from Abigail. What is your process for taking plot and overarching themes and developing them into individual scenes? Oh, that's a good question. Um, I guess anybody here can take a shot at it. I'm thinking about it. I don't have an
That
answer.
is not for me.
Yeah, yeah.
Can you repeat the question?
What is your process for taking plot, overarching themes, and developing them into individual scenes? I'll go first here just to like, give y'all some time to think because I realize, and this is not a sexy answer at all. Like, I don't know if I think about theme that much at all in my first draft. So I'm really, in some ways, when I'm writing the first draft, I'm just trying to get something down that I can then fix and think about those elements. And so the way I end up making scenes feel thematic is through revision. Sort of trial and error. This doesn't work. This does. And like I end up from my first draft to final draft, I probably toss 70% of the material. So like I really do a lot of drafts. That's just the only way I know. So that's my process. It comes out through the improvement that comes with every revision.
Me, I'm like, what do I do? I think that I think that unfortunately I don't think I think about writing in that logical of a way. I think that for me it is I'm not a plotter and I'm not a person who is thinking too much about scene as I write those scenes. I kind of know what scene needs to happen next. I think that what Lamar is saying does resonate a lot with me as well as like I do a lot in editing in like second drafts or where my editor is saying that there's a spot. But I don't really do any kind of outlining beforehand. I will say that like when I use extended metaphor a lot in my books, so I do plot where that extended metaphor is. So like for me, Moth, it goes through the life cycle of a moth, and her name is Moth on top of that. And so I'm like, okay, if she's in a cocoon here, let's use a lot of imagery that has to do with feeling closed in. So I'll make like notes like that. And so then when she's turning into a caterpillar kind of metaphor, like what are these kinds of things about describing the road, going on a road trip? How does this feel like elongated? And how am I using that kind of language? I will do that kind of thing. And but I don't know that I plot specific scenes. Now I'm thinking maybe I should be doing that. Thank you for this question.
Um, I'm going to
That's
break.
fascinating. I love that.
I have to make a couple of announcements. We have about 10 minutes left. So bear with me because I'm always nervous I'm going to mess this part up because I got to do a whole share screen thing. But let's see if we can make this happen. The first thing I want to tell everyone about is on April 21st, we're going to have an in-person event on campus with America's hottest thriller writer, Mr. S.A. Cosby. I'll put a link in the chat if you're interested in coming. This is an in-person event. It's free, but you have to register because seating is limited. And I can tell you now, there are seats left, but not very many. So if you're interested and you haven't registered for this one, I'll provide the link. Do what you need to do, and I hope to see you there on the 21st. And then a week later, we have an evening with historical fiction writer Sadiqa Johnson. And this is another one where the seating is limited, but it is free. I'll also provide the link to that. We're going to be talking about her new book, Keeper of Lost Children, among some other really fun and surprising things. So I really encourage anyone who's interested in seeing these really great writers in person to register. It's going to be a good time. I'm looking forward to talking to them. They're good friends, just like Amber and Carter are good friends. And so you see, we have a good time when we all get together. Um, Okay, are we back to seeing faces now? Like, are we looking at each other? Okay.
Got that. You
I
nailed
see.
it.
Um, so I'm curious about this for you both. All the awards and critical acclaim you've received, does it affect the way you work now in any way? Like, is there any pressure to replicate your past successes?
You know, everything Emmy wants to say no, but it's hard, but it's like it's not a bad problem to have, but I have to be really cautious to keep the integrity of a new project what it is. Like I can just spin out into like, what if this doesn't get like, what if Kirkus hates it? You know, like who cares? Like, am I doing the best that I can do? And I think often like something I try to remind myself, and I believe that I haven't made my best work yet. Like I think that's sort of a brain trick a little bit. Like I have to tell myself that, but also I think maybe that's true. And you know, acclaim and eyes on your work and you know how that leads to new opportunities is like so cool and exciting, but that's never going to be the reason that I make books. So it's a tricky balance though for sure.
Um, I think I'm thinking the same way you are, Carter. Like in theory, no. In reality, um, I think that, like you were saying, I haven't written if my every book I'm writing, if it's not like working at the edge of my talent, at the edge of what I think I can do, I'm bored. And so the goal would hopefully be that I'm always improving. But a huge part for me is that I talk about this in therapy, is that I try not to put too much on awards and accolades and those kinds of things because my new rule is if I don't have your number and you're not someone I talk to every day, I shouldn't care that much about whether you hated my book or loved my book. Like I'm presenting a product at the end of the day. And that's really difficult to remember. It's like it comes from so much work, right? But like it is something that is going to be judged and that's just uh life. And so I think that I try not to know any of the award dates. So when things happen, I'm not like, am I gonna get a call or this? Um, which is like both times I got National Book Award, I was asleep. So, and people were texting like, wake up. And so like I think that really is I try to trick myself into not knowing and not checking dates because you can get obsessive about this kind of thing. And forget about your readers more than, you know, the accolades. And so I
But can we just take a moment though for both times I got National Book Award? Like that is an
at
incredible
all.
sentence. That's amazing.
Yeah, it is. It is quite amazing. Double
Surreal.
congrats.
Wait, I will say the cool thing about that is the only reason I feel very, very like extra excited about it is because my first one was COVID. So I never got to go to the ceremony. And this year I did, and I got to experience all that. That was like really exciting. But yeah, I think it is. It's one of those things where you just kind of hope for the best. Like, will Kirkus give me a good review? Who knows? And they can be a bit sassy. We don't know.
This is true. This is true. I know we're winding down. We got one question from the audience, and then maybe I have time for my quick selfish questions. This is from Shannon. Before getting an agent and publisher, did you submit or publish with lit mags, whether that be short stories, essays, etc.?
I did. I have several, and I still do. But that's kind of for the professor aspect. I have to have publications happening. So I have a lot of Lit Mag publications for poetry, short story, and nonfiction.
Okay.
That's cool.
I'm going to ask my selfish questions now while I still have you both. Um, Amber, what's your favorite scene from Sinners that is not the surreal montage?
The entire scene at the door where he's like, y'all clan, and it just is funny and really intense, and the acting is perfect, and like somehow there's humor, and him being offended that he's like, I am a vampire. I am not part of the clan, which is hilarious.
Favorite is the door scene too. I love the scene where Cornbread's trying to get back in.
Yes, yes. Oh, that's a good one. That's a good one. That acting is just so good in
Yeah,
like all those like there's not much happening, but there's so much happening. Yeah.
like you say, humor, scary stuff, get serious. Like it's a really perfect balance. Um, Carter, I wrote a book set in Las Vegas called Overturn, and you used to live there. So I'm just curious, what's your favorite place in or near Vegas?
Yeah, I loved Las Vegas.
Yeah,
It was never a place I thought I would live. And when I got there, I was like, this is the most hidden gem. If you avoid the hoopla, like it is just a gorgeous, gorgeous city. And it just doesn't get better than Red Rocks, truly.
oh, my favorite place, and it's closed now. It was in the Cosmopolitan. It was this speakeasy behind this bookshelf called Rose Rabbit Lie. And
Ooh,
I stumbled upon it because they had like an acrobat outside one night doing stuff, kind of trying to lure people in. And it was a really fun time. Like
they
I said,
got you.
there.
They were.
Amber, you and me had a conversation about poetry a long time ago. I don't know if you remember this, but I'm asking you this question because I want to know a collection recommendation for someone like me who is often intimidated by poetry.
It's always gonna be Jericho Brown. The tradition
Okay.
is easy to go into, and also it's just you'll be blown away. Blown away.
Okay, I'm buying it. I will buy it as soon as we get off. Um, and Carter, I have an inquisitive 4-year-old. Who's going to kindergarten in the fall. I would love a picture book recommendation. She has a vast library, but I'm always looking to add to it.
I love that. Man, 4-year-olds are like my favorite people. Okay, there's a book I'm looking forward to. It comes out in July. It's called Today is the Day, and it's by Chelsea Lynn Wallace and Adam Rex. And it might be a perfect like first day of kindergarten sort of milestone book. The idea is that like on any one day, like someone's lost their first tooth and someone is like having the worst day of their life and like so many things happen in one day that it could be like your best or your worst. And what does that mean for the day itself? Like the day just exists for 24 hours and then they're gone. It's a very like it's like existential in a way that 4-year-olds like will tap right into.
I will also be purchasing once we get off. Look, I know you both have things to do. I appreciate you coming to hang out with us. I appreciate everyone who's tuned into this series for the 6 episodes we've done. Um, thank you all. Thank you all. Thank you all. And if I couldn't get to any questions in the chat, it's lgiles@wm.edu, and I will try to get you your answers. Thank you, Amber. Thank you, Carter. Uh, Go off and create more great things, and I look forward to seeing what you do next.
Thank you.
Likewise. Thank you both. Bye.
Bye, everybody.